Let's talk about Iran. Your assessment, do you think we're on a collision course, we being the United States, with that country?
I think it was the worst deal I've ever seen negotiated. I think it was a deal that should have never been negotiated. Absolutely, the deal that was made by the Obama administration. I think it's a shame that we've had a deal like that and that we had to sign a deal like that.
That was President Trump discussing growing tensions with Iran. It comes as Tehran responds to new sanctions with suggestions that they could destroy the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Joining us now for more, Jonathan Schanzer, the Vice President of Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and former terrorism analyst at the Treasury Department in D.C. So a great person to talk to about these sanctions. Just in general, Jonathan, as you've seen the news cycle over the last several days, do you think all this heated rhetoric puts us very close to a boiling point? How are you assessing the situation?
Hi, Jenna. Yeah, I don't see this as being the sort of a prelude to conflict. I think that these sanctions that were imposed on Iran were in response to a very specific event, notably a missile test, a ballistic missile test. It was actually the 12th such test since the nuclear deal was signed in 2015. The Obama administration really declined to respond to these. I think it was a weak policy on their part. The Trump administration made it very clear that they imposed those sanctions as a direct response to that missile threat and essentially told Iran not to do it anymore, which is what the U.S. should have been doing. It's what the P5+1 should have been doing. So it was a very commensurate response to the kind of provocation that we saw last week.
So how do you think the Trump administration should respond to these stories that are coming out of Iran through their state-sponsored news agencies, we should mention, that Iran is going to go after our base in Bahrain, and that in a few minutes' time they could also fire a missile at Tel Aviv? What should our response be, if anything, to that?
Well, our response should be to continue to impose sanctions on Iran. There are so many targets that we haven't touched, many that were delisted as a result of the nuclear deal. We can certainly arm our allies in the region and make sure that they have the capacity to respond to the Iranians in the face of aggression. And I think we need to really start to impose the nuclear deal. In other words, let's make sure to enforce it so that when they step out of bounds, we have the ability to really to cause some pain.
Let's talk more about the sanctions specifically, because over the last several years, we've talked a lot about sanctions, some of which you've liked, Jonathan, some of which you don't like. So what is it about these sanctions that you think are particularly effective, that they're actually getting that response from Iran?
Well, look, we had a huge amount of pressure on Iran before the deal was signed. It was one of the things that the Iranians, I think, it's what brought them to the table in the first place, is that they were really feeling it, primarily because they were cut off from the financial system, the formal financial system. They couldn't bank anywhere. Right now, they're back on the system, but there are a lot of companies and international banks that still refuse to deal with Iran because of the risks involved. And so we don't even have, it's not the pain that they're feeling through the sanctions, but because people understand that Iran is a rogue actor, that's one of the main reasons why they're frustrated and perhaps why they continue to act out the way they do.
I saw another news item, a very small article tucked away into the New York Post, and it was talking about Iran's nuclear chief claiming that he's stockpiling uranium. And I was curious your thoughts on that, especially in light of the nuclear deal. What is that all about?
So this is natural uranium that they are bringing in. It is technically legal according to the deal, and it's one of those things that just really underscores how flawed the deal was to begin with, that Iran can do this legally, that it's part of the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. What does Iran need all that uranium for, if not for a nuclear weapon? So again, it just underscores how flawed it was, why we do need to get back in there and try to enforce things and maybe even change things a little bit.
We'll see what the next step is from this point on. Jonathan, great to have you back in the program. Thank you.
Pleasure.